Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through time that will carry you gently into the realm of dreams, while enriching your mind with the magnificent tapestry of ancient Egyptian civilization. Tonight, we embark on a peaceful voyage along the timeless Nile River, where the sands of time have preserved stories of pharaohs and pyramids, gods and goddesses, scribes and slaves, all woven together in the golden threads of history that span over 3 millennia. As you settle into your comfortable position, allow your breathing to slow and deepen. Feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, like the morning mist rising from the sacred waters of the Nile. Tonight, you are not merely a listener, but a traveler through time, floating peacefully down the great river that gave birth to one of humanity's most enduring civilizations. Close your eyes and imagine yourself drifting on a gentle papyrus boat, the warm Egyptian sun setting behind distant palm trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that the ancient Egyptians believed were the colors of the gods themselves. The rhythmic lapping of water against your vessel creates a soothing melody that will accompany us throughout our journey, a constant reminder of the life-giving force that made Egypt the gift of the Nile. Let your mind release any tensions or worries from today. They have no place in our ancient world, where time moves as slowly and steadily as the great river itself. Tonight, we will explore the rise and fall of dynasties, the construction of monuments that still inspire awe today, and the daily lives of people who lived and loved and dreamed along these same riverbanks thousands of years ago. Chapter 1: The Dawn of Civilization. Predynastic Egypt, 6000 to 3100 BCE. Our story begins in the mists of prehistory, when the Sahara was not yet a desert, but a vast savanna dotted with lakes and rivers, where early humans hunted gazelles and gathered wild grains under skies that knew no boundaries between earth and heaven. These were the ancestors of the Egyptians, nomadic peoples who gradually settled along the fertile banks of the Nile as the climate slowly changed and the great desert began to claim the lands to the east and west. Picture, if you will, these early settlements emerging like lotus flowers from the muddy banks of the river. Small clusters of reed huts, their walls daubed with mud from the annual flood, housed families who had discovered the secret of the Nile's rhythm. They learned to read the river's moods, to predict when the life-giving waters would rise and spread across the land, depositing the rich black silt that would make Egypt the breadbasket of the ancient world. In these peaceful villages, the foundations of Egyptian civilization were quietly being laid. Women ground grain on stone querns, while their children played with clay toys shaped like the animals they saw along the riverbank. Men crafted the first boats from bundled papyrus reeds, learning to navigate the gentle currents that would one day carry the barges of pharaohs laden with gold and precious stones. The pottery of this era tells us stories of a people deeply connected to their environment. Decorated with images of hippos and crocodiles, birds and fish, these vessels reveal a society that saw the divine in every aspect of the natural world. The Nile was not merely a river to them, but a god whose annual flood brought life itself. The sun was not simply a celestial body, but Ra, the great creator who sailed across the sky in his solar bark, bringing light and warmth to the world below. As centuries passed, like the gentle flow of the river itself, these scattered communities began to coalesce into larger settlements. Trade routes developed along the Nile, carrying not just goods, but ideas, technologies, and beliefs that would eventually unite the entire river valley under a single crown. The art of metalworking arrived from the north, bringing with it the ability to create more sophisticated tools and weapons. The knowledge of agriculture spread from village to village, teaching people to harness the flood's power through irrigation channels and storage basins. In the southern regions, around what would later become the city of Hierakonpolis, powerful chieftains began to emerge. These early rulers, whose names are lost to history, but whose influence shaped the future of Egypt, established the first royal courts and began the long process of political unification that would culminate in the creation of the world's first nation-state. The religious beliefs that would define Egyptian civilization for 3,000 years were taking shape during these formative centuries. The concept of Ma'at, the divine order that governed both the cosmos and human society, emerged from the observation of the Nile's reliable annual cycle. Just as the river rose and fell with perfect regularity, so too must human society follow divine laws that ensured harmony and prosperity. Burial practices, which would become so central to Egyptian culture, evolved from simple graves in the desert sand to more elaborate tombs lined with mud bricks and filled with pottery vessels containing food and drink for the deceased. The dry desert climate naturally mummified bodies, leading to the belief that preservation of the physical form was necessary for survival in the afterlife. This discovery would eventually give rise to the sophisticated mummification techniques that would make Egyptian mortuary practices famous throughout the ancient world. As we drift deeper into sleep, imagine yourself walking through one of these ancient villages at twilight. The air is warm and still, filled with the scent of baking bread and the smoke of cooking fires. Children's laughter echoes across the water as they splash in the shallows, while their elders sit in the doorways of their homes, sharing stories and wisdom passed down through generations. The stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, the same constellations that guided these ancient people and that still shine down upon us today, connecting us across the vast expanse of time to our shared human heritage. Chapter 2: The Birth of Pharaonic Egypt. Early Dynastic Period, 3100 to 2686 BCE. As the first light of dawn breaks over the ancient landscape, we witness one of history's most momentous events: the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under a single ruler. This achievement, traditionally attributed to a king known as Menes or Nama, marked the beginning of pharaonic civilization and the establishment of the world's first unified nation-state. The story of unification unfolds like a dream itself, shrouded in legend and symbolism that the ancient Egyptians themselves cherished. Picture the scene. Two lands that had developed distinct cultures and traditions along the length of the great river, each with its own gods, customs, and rulers, suddenly brought together under the authority of a single crown. The king of Upper Egypt, wearing the tall white crown of the south, marches northward with his armies, conquering the settlements of the delta and claiming dominion over the fertile lands where the Nile spreads into multiple channels before reaching the Mediterranean Sea. This unification was not merely a political conquest, but a cosmic event that the Egyptians believed restored the divine order established by the gods at the creation of the world. The pharaoh, as the earthly representative of the gods, became the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed deity who was the son of Osiris and Isis. Through this divine connection, the king possessed the authority to maintain Ma'at, the cosmic balance that ensured the Nile would continue to flood, the sun would continue to rise, and Egypt would remain prosperous and secure. The newly unified kingdom required a capital, and so the city of Memphis was founded at the junction of Upper and Lower Egypt, where the Nile Valley meets the Delta. This strategic location allowed the pharaoh to control both regions of his realm, while serving as a symbol of unity between the two lands. Memphis would remain one of Egypt's most important cities for over 2 millennia, its temples and palaces serving as the stage for countless royal ceremonies and religious festivals. The early pharaohs established many of the institutions and traditions that would define Egyptian kingship for centuries to come. The concept of divine kingship, which made the pharaoh both a god and a man, required elaborate rituals and ceremonies to maintain the connection between the earthly and divine realms. The king's daily routine became a sacred performance, with every action from his morning ablutions to his evening prayers carefully prescribed by religious tradition. Royal tombs of this period, found at Abydos and Saqqara, revealed the growing sophistication of Egyptian society and the increasing power of the pharaoh. These early mastaba tombs, rectangular structures built of mud, brick, and stone, contained multiple chambers filled with grave goods that reflected the wealth and status of their occupants. Servants and courtiers were sometimes buried alongside their royal masters, a practice that speaks to the absolute authority of the pharaoh and the belief that he would need his retinue in the afterlife. The development of hieroglyphic writing during this period represents one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. These sacred symbols, which the Egyptians believed were given to them by Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, allowed for the recording of royal names, religious texts, and administrative records. The earliest hieroglyphic inscriptions, found on ivory labels and stone vessels in royal tombs, mark the beginning of recorded history in Egypt and provide us with our first glimpses into the minds and beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. Trade networks expanded dramatically during the early dynastic period, as the unified kingdom's resources and organizational capabilities allowed for more ambitious commercial ventures. Egyptian merchants traveled south into Nubia in search of gold, ivory, and exotic animals, while others journeyed northeast to the Levant to obtain cedar wood, silver, and lapis lazuli. These trade relationships not only brought material wealth to Egypt, but also facilitated the exchange of ideas and technologies that would enrich Egyptian civilization. The religious landscape of unified Egypt began to take on the complex character that would define it for millennia. Local deities from different regions were incorporated into a national pantheon, with some gods rising to prominence, while others remained important only in their traditional cult centers. The sun god Ra began his ascent to supremacy during this period, as the pharaohs of the early dynasties identified themselves with the solar deity and promoted his worship throughout the kingdom. As you continue to relax and drift towards sleep, envision yourself standing on the banks of the Nile during these formative years of Egyptian civilization. The river flows past you with the same gentle rhythm it has maintained for millions of years, carrying papyrus boats laden with goods from distant lands. In the distance, you can see the white walls of Memphis gleaming in the sunlight, while closer to shore, farmers tend their fields with the same care and devotion that their descendants would show for generations to come. The air is filled with the sounds of a civilization coming into its own, the chanting of priests in distant temples, the calls of merchants in the marketplace, and the laughter of children playing in the shadow of monuments that will endure long after their builders have returned to dust. Chapter 3: The Age of Pyramids, Old Kingdom, 2686, 2181 BCE. As we drift deeper into the realm of dreams, we enter the most magnificent period of ancient Egyptian civilization, an age when pharaohs commanded the construction of monuments so grand and enduring that they would be counted among the wonders of the world. The Old Kingdom, often called the Pyramid Age, represents the pinnacle of Egyptian achievement in architecture, art, and administration. A time when the power of the pharaoh reached its zenith and the kingdom enjoyed unprecedented prosperity and stability. The story of the pyramids begins with a revolutionary idea conceived by Imhotep, the brilliant architect and physician who served Pharaoh Djoser of the Third Dynasty. Standing in the royal cemetery at Saqqara, Imhotep envisioned a tomb unlike any that had come before. Not a simple mastaba built close to the ground, but a structure that would reach toward the heavens themselves. A stairway for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to join the gods among the stars. The step pyramid of Djoser, rising in 6 magnificent tiers to a height of over 200 feet, marked the beginning of the Pyramid Age and demonstrated the incredible organizational capabilities of the Egyptian state. Imagine the thousands of workers who labored on this project. Skilled stonemasons cutting blocks of limestone with copper tools, teams of men hauling massive stones up ramps with ropes and wooden rollers, architects and engineers solving complex problems of engineering and design that had never been attempted before. But it was during the Fourth Dynasty that pyramid building reached its absolute peak, with the construction of the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. This colossal monument, originally standing at over 480 feet tall and containing more than 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, represents one of the most remarkable achievements in human history. For over 4,000 years, it remained the tallest structure ever built by human hands, a testament to the vision, skill, and determination of its creators. Picture yourself approaching the Giza Plateau on a clear morning during the reign of Khufu, around 2580 BCE. The 3 great pyramids rise before you like artificial mountains, their smooth limestone casing stones gleaming white in the desert sun. The Great Pyramid dominates the landscape, its perfect geometric form a symbol of the pharaoh's divine power and the eternal nature of his rule. Nearby, the Sphinx keeps its eternal vigil, its human head representing the wisdom of the king, and its lion's body symbolizing his strength and courage. The construction of these monuments required not only enormous human resources, but also sophisticated knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. The builders of the Great Pyramid aligned it with cardinal directions to an accuracy of just a few arc minutes. incorporated the golden ratio into its proportions, and created internal chambers and passages that demonstrate a deep understanding of structural engineering. The precision of their work is so remarkable that even today, with all our modern technology, we would find it challenging to match their achievements. The pyramid complexes were not merely tombs, but complete religious installations designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful transition to the afterlife and his continued rule in the realm of the gods. Each pyramid was surrounded by smaller pyramids for queens and family members, mastaba tombs for nobles and officials, and elaborate temples where priests performed daily rituals to maintain the king's divine essence. Causeways connected the pyramid temples to valley temples on the edge of the cultivation, creating a sacred landscape that reflected the Egyptians' understanding of the cosmos. The society that created these monuments was highly stratified but remarkably stable. At the apex stood the pharaoh, believed to be a living god whose word was law and whose welfare was essential to the prosperity of the entire kingdom. Below him were the nobles and high officials who administered the kingdom, followed by the scribes and craftsmen who kept the complex machinery of government and religion functioning smoothly. At the base of the social pyramid were the farmers and laborers whose work in the fields and on construction projects provided the economic foundation for Egyptian civilization. The religious beliefs of the Old Kingdom centered on the concept of the pharaoh as the son of Ra, the sun god who had become the supreme deity of the Egyptian pantheon. Each day, Ra sailed across the sky in his solar bark, bringing light and life to the world, and each night he journeyed through the underworld, battling the forces of chaos before being reborn at dawn. The pharaoh, as Ra's earthly representative, participated in this cosmic cycle, and his pyramid served as a machine for resurrection, ensuring that he would join Ra in his eternal journey across the heavens. The pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings in the world, were first inscribed on the walls of pyramid chambers during the 5th and 6th dynasties. These sacred spells and incantations provide us with our earliest detailed glimpse into Egyptian beliefs about death and the afterlife. They describe the pharaoh's journey through the underworld, his transformation into a god, and his ascension to the imperishable stars that never set below the horizon. Daily life during the Old Kingdom was governed by the rhythm of the Nile and the agricultural calendar. The annual flood, which the Egyptians called the inundation, brought not only water and fertile silt, but also a period of relative leisure when farmers could be employed on royal construction projects. The flood's arrival was celebrated with festivals and ceremonies that reinforced the connection between the pharaoh's divine power and the prosperity of the land. As you sink deeper into peaceful sleep, imagine yourself as a scribe in the court of an Old Kingdom pharaoh, sitting in the shade of a palm tree beside the Nile, carefully recording the day's events on a roll of papyrus. The sun is warm on your back, and a gentle breeze carries the scent of lotus blossoms from the temple gardens. In the distance, you can hear the rhythmic chanting of workers as they haul stone blocks up the ramps of a rising pyramid, their voices blending with the eternal song of the river and the whisper of wind through the reeds. Time seems to stand still in this perfect moment, as it did for the ancient Egyptians who believed that their civilization would endure forever, as eternal and unchanging as the stars themselves. Chapter 4. The Middle Kingdom Renaissance, 2055 to 1650 BCE. After a period of political fragmentation known as the First Intermediate Period, Egypt emerged renewed and revitalized under the pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom, an era often considered the classical age of Egyptian literature, art, and culture. Like a lotus flower opening to the morning sun after a long night, the reunified kingdom blossomed with new ideas, artistic innovations, and a more nuanced understanding of the relationship between rulers and their subjects. The reunification of Egypt was achieved by Mentuhotep II of Thebes, a pharaoh whose name means "Montu is satisfied," referring to the falcon-headed war god who had become the patron deity of the Theban rulers. Picture this determined king leading his armies northward from his capital in Upper Egypt, gradually conquering the rival kingdoms that had emerged during the chaotic years of the First Intermediate Period. His victory was not merely military, but spiritual, as he restored Ma'at to a land that had suffered from the absence of divine kingship. Thebes, the southern city that had been relatively unimportant during the Old Kingdom, now emerged as Egypt's new capital and would remain one of its most significant cities for the next 2 millennia. The Thebans brought with them their local god Amun, who would eventually be merged with Ra to become Amun-Ra, the king of the gods and the supreme deity of the Egyptian pantheon. The great temple complex at Karnak, which would grow over the centuries to become the largest religious building ever constructed, had its humble beginnings during this period. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs, particularly those of the 12th dynasty, were remarkable rulers who combined military prowess with administrative genius and cultural patronage. Amenemhat I, the founder of the dynasty, established a new capital called Ichitawi, Caesar of the Two Lands, strategically located between Memphis and Thebes to symbolize the unity of Upper and Lower Egypt. His successors, bearing names like Senusret and Amenemhat, would rule Egypt for over 200 years, bringing unprecedented prosperity and stability to the kingdom. These pharaohs were great builders, but their monuments differed significantly from the massive pyramids of the Old Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom pyramids, constructed primarily of mud brick with stone casing, were smaller and more economical, reflecting a more pragmatic approach to royal tomb construction. Instead of concentrating enormous resources on a single monument, the Middle Kingdom rulers invested in infrastructure projects that benefited the entire kingdom: irrigation systems, fortresses, and trade networks that extended Egypt's influence far beyond the Nile Valley. The conquest and colonization of Nubia during the Middle Kingdom brought vast wealth to Egypt in the form of gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals. The pharaohs constructed a series of massive fortresses along the Nile in Nubia, engineering marvels that controlled river traffic and protected Egyptian mining operations. These fortresses, with names like repelling the Asiatics and curbing the countries, were not merely military installations, but complete administrative centers that projected Egyptian power and culture deep into Africa. Literature flourished during the Middle Kingdom as never before, producing works that are still considered masterpieces of world literature. The Tale of Sinuhe, perhaps the finest example of ancient Egyptian narrative literature, tells the story of a court official who flees Egypt after the assassination of his pharaoh and lives in exile among the Asiatics, before eventually returning home to die in his beloved homeland. The story explores themes of loyalty, identity, and the meaning of home that resonate across cultures and centuries. The eloquent peasant presents the remarkable story of a simple farmer who, when robbed by a corrupt official, delivers a series of eloquent speeches about justice and righteousness that eventually reach the ears of the pharaoh himself. This tale reflects the Middle Kingdom's more sophisticated understanding of social justice and the responsibilities of rulers toward their subjects, a marked departure from the absolute divine kingship of the Old Kingdom. Religious thought during the Middle Kingdom became more democratized, with beliefs and practices that had once been reserved for the pharaoh becoming available to nobles and eventually to all Egyptians who could afford proper burial preparations. The coffin texts, painted on the wooden coffins of Middle Kingdom nobles, adapted and expanded the royal pyramid texts, allowing ordinary Egyptians to participate in the afterlife journey that had previously been the exclusive privilege of kings. The concept of personal piety emerged during this period, with individuals developing direct relationships with the gods, rather than relying solely on the pharaoh as intermediary. People began to erect personal stelae in temples, recording their prayers and thanksgivings to the gods, and private chapels became common in wealthy households. This religious democratization reflected broader social changes that saw the emergence of a substantial middle class of officials, scribes, and craftsmen. Art during the Middle Kingdom achieved a new level of sophistication and emotional depth. Royal sculpture abandoned the idealized perfection of Old Kingdom art in favor of more realistic portrayals that showed pharaohs as careworn rulers bearing the weight of their responsibilities. The famous sculptures of Senusret III, with their deeply lined faces and brooding expressions, convey a sense of the burden of kingship that would have been unthinkable in earlier periods. The Middle Kingdom also saw significant advances in mathematics, medicine, and technology. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, a medical text from this period, demonstrates a remarkably scientific approach to surgery and anatomy, while mathematical papyri show sophisticated understanding of geometry and algebra. Egyptian craftsmen perfected techniques for working with bronze, creating tools and weapons of unprecedented quality and durability. As you continue your peaceful journey towards sleep, imagine yourself sailing on a Middle Kingdom trading expedition up the Nile toward Nubia. Your boat is laden with Egyptian goods, fine linen, jewelry, perfumes, and papyrus scrolls containing the latest literary works from the royal court. The river flows gently beneath your vessel, carrying you past temples and towns where people gather on the banks to watch your passage. The sun sets behind distant cliffs, painting the water gold and crimson, while the evening star appears in the darkening sky, guiding you toward distant lands where adventure and profit await. In this moment of perfect tranquility, you understand why the ancient Egyptians believed that the Nile was a gift from the gods, a river of life that connected all the peoples of the world in an eternal flow of commerce, culture, and human fellowship. Chapter 5. The Empire of the Pharaohs, New Kingdom, 1550–1077 BCE. As dawn breaks over the ancient world, we enter the most glorious and powerful period of Egyptian civilization, when the pharaohs ruled an empire that stretched from Nubia in the south to the Euphrates River in the north, and Egyptian culture influenced the entire ancient Near East. The New Kingdom represents the zenith of Egyptian power, wealth, and cultural achievement, an age of warrior pharaohs and magnificent temples, of international diplomacy and artistic brilliance that would make Egypt the envy of the ancient world. The New Kingdom began with a liberation that reads like an epic tale of heroism and determination. For over a century, northern Egypt had been ruled by foreign kings known as the Hyksos, rulers of foreign lands, who had introduced new military technologies like horse-drawn chariots and composite bows. The native Egyptian rulers, confined to Thebes in Upper Egypt, chafed under foreign domination until a series of warrior pharaohs named Kamose and Ahmose launched a war of liberation that would transform Egypt from a victim of foreign conquest into the master of an international empire. Ahmose I, the founder of the 18th dynasty and the New Kingdom, pursued the retreating Hyksos into Palestine and laid siege to their strongholds, demonstrating that Egypt would no longer be content to remain within its traditional borders. This military campaign marked the beginning of Egyptian imperialism and established the precedent for the great conquests that would follow under his successors. The pharaohs of the early 18th dynasty were remarkable rulers who combined military genius with administrative skill and cultural patronage. Thutmose. I extended Egyptian control deep into Nubia and led the first Egyptian army to cross the Euphrates River, while his grandson, Thutmose III, often called Egypt's Napoleon, conducted 17 military campaigns that established Egyptian hegemony over the Levant and made Egypt the dominant power in the ancient Near East. But perhaps no ruler of the New Kingdom captures the imagination quite like Hatshepsut, the woman who became pharaoh and ruled Egypt for over 20 years during the 15th century BCE. Picture this extraordinary woman who adopted the full regalia of pharaonic kingship, including the false beard and royal crowns, commissioning magnificent temples and trading expeditions while maintaining peace and prosperity throughout her realm. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, carved into the cliffs of the Theban necropolis, remains one of the most beautiful and innovative architectural achievements in Egyptian history. The reign of Amenhotep III marked the height of Egyptian wealth and international prestige. Known as the Sun King, centuries before Louis XIV claimed the title, Amenhotep III ruled over an empire so rich and powerful that foreign kings begged for Egyptian gold and sought marriages with Egyptian princesses. His palace at Malkata was a wonder of the ancient world, with artificial lakes, pleasure gardens, and reception halls decorated with the finest art that Egyptian craftsmen could produce. The religious revolution of Akhenaten represents one of the most fascinating episodes in ancient history. This pharaoh, originally named Amenhotep IV, abandoned the traditional Egyptian pantheon in favor of worshipping a single god, the Aten or solar disk, and moved his capital from Thebes to a new city called Akhetaten, Horizon of the Aten, at the site now known as Amarna. The art of the Amarna period broke dramatically with Egyptian tradition, depicting the royal family in intimate, naturalistic scenes that emphasized their humanity rather than their divinity. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb by Howard Carter in 1922 revealed the incredible wealth and artistic sophistication of the New Kingdom. Though Tutankhamun was a relatively minor pharaoh who died young, his burial equipment included over 5,000 objects of gold, silver, and precious stones, providing us with an unparalleled glimpse into the material culture of ancient Egypt's golden age. The famous golden mask, with its serene expression and perfect craftsmanship, has become an icon of ancient Egyptian civilization. The great pharaohs of the 19th dynasty, particularly Seti I and his son Ramesses II, were prolific builders who covered Egypt with magnificent temples and monuments. Ramesses II, known as Ramesses the Great, ruled for 66 years and left his mark on virtually every major site in Egypt. His temple at Abu Simbel, carved into the living rock of a cliff overlooking the Nile, features 4 colossal statues of the pharaoh that stand over 60 feet tall, proclaiming his power and glory to all who sailed past. The Battle of Kadesh, fought between Ramesses II and the Hittite king Muwatalli II around 1274 BCE, was one of the largest chariot battles in ancient history and resulted in the world's first recorded peace treaty. The Egyptian and Hittite versions of this treaty, inscribed on temple walls and clay tablets, established principles of international law and diplomacy that would influence relations between nations for centuries to come. The Valley of the Kings, the royal necropolis of the New Kingdom pharaohs, represents the pinnacle of ancient Egyptian tomb decoration and religious art. These elaborate underground tombs, carved deep into the limestone cliffs of the Theban hills, were decorated with scenes from religious texts like the Book of the Dead, the Book of Gates, and the Book of What is in the Underworld. The tomb of Seti I, with its astronomical ceiling and perfectly preserved wall paintings, is considered one of the finest examples of ancient Egyptian art. The temples of the New Kingdom, particularly those at Karnak and Luxor, grew into vast complexes that served not only as religious centers, but as economic and administrative hubs. The Great Temple of Amun at Karnak, built and expanded over many centuries, covered over 200 acres and employed thousands of priests, scribes, and workers. Its great hypostyle hall, with 134 massive columns arranged in 16 rows, creates a forest of stone that inspires awe even today. The wealth of the New Kingdom came not only from military conquest, but from extensive trade networks that connected Egypt with Africa, Asia, and the Mediterranean world. Egyptian merchants traded gold, papyrus, and linen for silver, cedar wood, ivory, and exotic spices, while diplomatic marriages and gift exchanges between royal courts created a web of international relationships that made Egypt the center of the ancient world's political and economic system. As you drift deeper into peaceful slumber, imagine yourself as a scribe in the court of Ramesses II, recording the pharaoh's great deeds for posterity. You sit in the shade of a colonnade in the great temple at Pi-Ramesses, the pharaoh's magnificent capital in the delta, while around you the business of empire continues. Ambassadors from distant lands presenting tribute, architects planning new monuments, and priests performing the daily rituals that maintain the cosmic order. The air is filled with the scent of incense and the sound of chanting, while the Nile flows peacefully past the city walls, carrying boats laden with the wealth of Africa and Asia. In this moment of perfect tranquility, you understand that you are living in the greatest age of the greatest civilization the world has ever known. A time when Egypt's power and glory seemed as eternal and unchanging as the stars themselves. Chapter 6: The Ptolemaic Twilight and Cleopatra's Legacy, 332–30 BCE. As our journey through the millennia of Egyptian history draws toward its close, we enter the final chapter of Pharaonic civilization, a period when Egypt, though no longer ruled by native pharaohs, experienced a remarkable renaissance under the Ptolemaic dynasty, founded by one of Alexander the Great's generals. This era, spanning 3 centuries, would produce the most famous queen in history and witness the final transformation of ancient Egypt from an independent kingdom into a province of the Roman Empire. The arrival of Alexander the Great in Egypt in 332 BCE marked the end of Persian rule and the beginning of a new chapter in Egyptian history. Picture the young Macedonian conqueror, barely 24 years old, being welcomed as a liberator by the Egyptian people who had chafed under Persian domination. Alexander's visit to the Oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis, where he was proclaimed the son of the god, legitimized his rule in Egyptian eyes and established a precedent for the divine kingship that his successors would claim. After Alexander's death in Babylon in 323 BCE, his vast empire was divided among his generals, and Egypt fell to Ptolemy I Soter, a Macedonian nobleman who had been one of Alexander's closest companions. Ptolemy established a dynasty that would rule Egypt for nearly 300 years, adopting Egyptian royal traditions while maintaining their Greek identity and culture. The Ptolemies became pharaohs in the truest sense, performing the ancient rituals and building temples to the Egyptian gods while simultaneously promoting Greek learning and culture. Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander at the mouth of the Nile, became the greatest center of learning and culture in the ancient world under Ptolemaic rule. The famous Library of Alexandria, established by the early Ptolemies, attempted to collect all human knowledge in one place, attracting scholars, scientists, and philosophers from across the Mediterranean world. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, guided ships safely into the harbor while serving as a symbol of the city's role as a beacon of civilization. The Ptolemaic period witnessed a remarkable fusion of Egyptian and Greek cultures that produced new forms of art, religion, and learning. Egyptian temples built during this era, such as those at Edfu, Dendera, and Philae, represent the final flowering of pharaonic architecture, combining traditional Egyptian forms with Hellenistic innovations. The temple walls were covered with hieroglyphic texts that preserved ancient religious traditions while incorporating new theological concepts developed by Ptolemaic priests. The Rosetta Stone, discovered by Napoleon's soldiers in 1799, exemplifies this cultural fusion. Inscribed with the same text in hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek scripts, it served as the key that allowed Jean-François Champollion to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs and unlock the secrets of ancient Egyptian civilization. The stone itself was created during the reign of Ptolemy V to announce a royal decree, demonstrating how the Ptolemies used multiple languages and scripts to communicate with their diverse subjects. The later Ptolemies faced increasing pressure from the rising power of Rome, which gradually extended its influence over the Eastern Mediterranean. Internal dynastic conflicts weakened the kingdom, as brothers fought sisters and parents battled children for control of the throne. The Ptolemaic practice of sibling marriage, adopted from Pharaonic tradition, led to a complex web of family relationships that often erupted into civil war. It was into this world of political intrigue and cultural sophistication that Cleopatra VII was born around 69 BCE. The last active pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra was a remarkable woman who spoke 9 languages, was educated in mathematics, philosophy, and rhetoric, and possessed the political acumen to navigate the treacherous waters of late Republican Roman politics. Contrary to popular belief, she was likely not exceptionally beautiful by conventional standards, but her intelligence, charisma, and political skill made her one of the most powerful women in the ancient world. Cleopatra's relationships with Julius Caesar, and later with Mark Antony, were not merely romantic liaisons, but sophisticated political alliances designed to preserve Egyptian independence in the face of Roman expansion. Her meeting with Caesar, when she had herself smuggled into his presence wrapped in a carpet, demonstrated the theatrical flair and political cunning that characterized her entire reign. Their relationship produced a son, Caesarion, whom Cleopatra claimed was Caesar's heir, though Caesar never officially acknowledged the boy. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, one of the 3 men who divided the Roman world among themselves. Their partnership was both personal and political, producing 3 children and creating a power block that controlled the Eastern Mediterranean. Antony's adoption of Egyptian royal customs and his apparent intention to establish an Eastern empire with Alexandria as its capital alarmed the Roman Senate and provided Octavian, the future Augustus, with the pretext for war. The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE marked the end of Ptolemaic Egypt and the beginning of Roman rule. Cleopatra and Antony's combined fleet was defeated by Octavian's forces, and the lovers fled back to Alexandria, where they would spend their final year in a mixture of desperate political maneuvering and fatalistic celebration. The Society of Inimitable Livers that they founded during this period was dedicated to pleasure and philosophical discussion in the face of inevitable doom. Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE, traditionally attributed to the bite of an asp, but more likely caused by poison, marked the end of 3 millennia of pharaonic rule in Egypt. With her death, Egypt became a Roman province, and the ancient traditions that had survived conquest by Persians, Greeks, and Romans finally began to fade away. The last hieroglyphic inscription was carved in 394 CE, and the ancient Egyptian language gradually gave way to Coptic and eventually to Arabic. Yet Cleopatra's legacy extends far beyond her political achievements. She became a symbol of female power and exotic allure that has inspired countless works of art, literature, and drama. From Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra to Hollywood films, her story continues to captivate audiences who see in her a woman who refused to accept the limitations that society placed on her gender and who fought to preserve her kingdom's independence against overwhelming odds. The Ptolemaic period also preserved much of ancient Egyptian culture for posterity. The temples built during this era, with their detailed hieroglyphic inscriptions, provided scholars with the materials needed to reconstruct ancient Egyptian religion, mythology, and history. The Greek historians who lived in Alexandria, such as Manetho, recorded Egyptian traditions and chronologies that would otherwise have been lost forever. As you sink into the deepest levels of peaceful sleep, imagine yourself standing on the marble steps of the great lighthouse of Alexandria as the sun sets over the Mediterranean Sea. The harbor below is filled with ships from every corner of the ancient world, their sails furled as they rest at anchor after long voyages. The city spreads out before you, its wide boulevards and magnificent buildings reflecting the cosmopolitan culture that made Alexandria the greatest city of its age. In the distance, you can see the pyramids of Giza, ancient even then, standing as eternal monuments to the civilization that gave birth to this final flowering of pharaonic culture. The evening breeze carries the scent of spices and perfumes from the marketplace, while the sound of many languages mingles with the gentle lapping of waves against the harbor walls. In this moment of perfect tranquility, you understand that you are witnessing the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new chapter in the long story of human civilization, as the wisdom and achievements of ancient Egypt prepare to spread throughout the world, carried by the winds of change into an uncertain but hopeful future. Epilogue: The Eternal Nile. As our journey through 3 millennia of Egyptian civilization draws to its peaceful close, we find ourselves once again beside the eternal Nile, the great river that gave birth to one of humanity's most enduring and influential cultures. The pharaohs have returned to dust. Their pyramids stand weathered by time, and their temples echo with the whispers of tourists rather than the chants of priests. Yet something essential of ancient Egypt remains, flowing like the river itself through the consciousness of humanity. The legacy of ancient Egypt extends far beyond the monuments and artifacts that fill our museums. The Egyptians gave us the concept of the afterlife as a place of judgment, where moral behavior in this world determines one's fate in the next. They developed medicine, mathematics, and engineering to levels that would not be surpassed for centuries. They created art of such beauty and power that it continues to move us today, and they established principles of divine kingship and cosmic order that influence civilizations throughout the ancient world. Perhaps most importantly, the ancient Egyptians understood something that we are only beginning to rediscover: that human beings are part of a larger cosmic order, connected to the natural world and to each other in ways that transcend the boundaries of time and space. Their concept of Ma'at, the divine principle of truth, justice, and cosmic balance, reminds us that our actions have consequences not only for ourselves, but for the entire universe. As you drift into the deepest and most peaceful sleep, carry with you the wisdom of the ancient Egyptians, who believed that death was not an ending, but a transformation, that love was stronger than time, and that the human spirit, like the Nile itself, flows eternal and unchanging through all the seasons of existence. Let their stories become your dreams, their wisdom your guide, and their eternal optimism your comfort, as you rest in the knowledge that you are part of a story that began with the first sunrise over the Nile and will continue as long as human beings seek meaning, beauty, and truth in the world around them. Sleep well, dear traveler, and may your dreams be filled with the golden light of the Egyptian sun, the gentle sound of the Nile flowing toward the sea, and the eternal peace that comes from knowing that you are connected to something larger and more beautiful than yourself. In the morning, you will wake refreshed and renewed, carrying within you the timeless wisdom of the Pharaohs and the eternal promise of the river that flows through all our dreams.